The rain fell like bullets against the cracked pavement of East Brooklyn, each drop exploding into 1,000 smaller pieces under the dim orange glow of the streetlights. It was the kind of November night that seeped into your bones, cold and unforgiving, where even the rats knew better than to venture out from their hiding places beneath the dumpsters. Ava Bennett pulled her worn jacket tighter around her shoulders as she stepped off the M train at Myrtle Wyckoff Avenue. 12 hours. That's how long she'd been on her feet at Mount Sinai Hospital, moving from one patient to the next, her hands steady, even when her body screamed for rest. The fluorescent lights of the hospital still seemed to burn behind her eyelids, and the antiseptic smell clung to her scrubs beneath her clothes. She was 28 years old, and some days she felt twice that. The walk from the subway to her brownstone apartment was only 6 blocks, but tonight it felt like miles. The streets were empty except for the occasional car that hissed past, tires cutting through puddles, spraying water onto the sidewalk. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of working-class area where people minded their own business and kept their doors locked after dark. Ava liked it that way, anonymous, safe, predictable. Her building stood at the end of Hancock Street, a 3-story brownstone that had seen better days. The brick facade was weathered, the front steps chipped and uneven. But it was hers, or at least the small 1-bedroom on the 2nd floor was. She'd lived there for 3 years, ever since graduating from nursing school with more debt than dreams. As she climbed the front steps fishing her keys from her bag, something made her pause. A sound, not the rain, not the wind, something else. Ava froze, her hand hovering over the lock. There it was again. A wet, dragging sound like something heavy being pulled across concrete. Her heart rate picked up, that primal instinct that told her something was wrong. She turned slowly, peering into the darkness beyond the reach of the porch light. Nothing, just rain and shadows. "Get inside," she muttered to herself, shaking her head. "You're exhausted, you're hearing things." She unlocked the door and stepped into the small vestibule, relief washing over her as she closed out the cold. The hallway light was dim. The landlord still hadn't replaced the bulb she'd asked about 2 weeks ago, but it was enough to see the stairs leading up to her apartment. Ava had one foot on the first step when the sound came again. This time, unmistakable. Knocking. Not at the main door, but at her apartment door. Upstairs. Her blood went cold. Nobody knocked on her door at... She glanced at her watch. 2:47 in the morning. Nobody. Her friends knew her schedule. Her family was 3 states away in Pennsylvania. Even the landlord wouldn't dare show up at this hour. The knocking came again, more desperate this time, frantic, like whoever was on the other side was using their last strength. Ava's nursing instincts warred with her common sense. Every reasonable part of her brain screamed to stay put, to call the police, to not open that door. But the other part, the part that had dedicated her life to helping people, was already moving up the stairs. "Who is it?" she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. No answer, just another weak knock followed by a sound that made her stomach drop. A groan. Pain. Someone was hurt. Ava reached the landing and approached her door slowly. She could see a shadow in the gap beneath it, could hear ragged breathing on the other side. "I'm a nurse," she said firmly, pressing close to the door. "If you're injured, I can help you, but you need to tell me what's going on." Silence. Then, a voice. Male. Rough. Barely above a whisper. "Please." That single word carried so much pain, so much desperation, that Ava's hand was turning the deadbolt before she could stop herself. She opened the door 6 inches, the chain still engaged, and peered through the gap. A man was slumped against her doorframe, his weight pressed against the wood as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. He was tall, she could tell even with him doubled over, and wore what had once been an expensive suit. Now it was soaked through with rain and something darker. Blood. So much blood. Jesus. Ava breathed, her professional assessment kicking in automatically. Gunshot wound, left shoulder, active bleeding, possible exit wound, patient conscious but deteriorating. The man lifted his head, and despite the pain etched into his features, Ava found herself staring into the most intense gray eyes she'd ever seen. They were clear, focused, calculating, even while his body was failing. "Help me," he said, and then his knees buckled. Ava didn't think. She disengaged the chain and caught him as he fell forward, his weight nearly taking them both down. He was heavy, solid muscle beneath the expensive fabric, and she struggled to keep him upright. Okay, I've got you," she said, her voice automatically shifting into the calm, authoritative tone she used with patience. "Can you walk? I need you to help me get you inside." He nodded, jaw clenched, and together they staggered into her apartment. Ava kicked the door shut behind them and half-dragged, half-guided him to her couch. He collapsed onto it with a groan, his hand pressed against his shoulder where blood was seeping through his fingers. Ava's apartment was small and modest, a lived-in space with worn furniture, medical textbooks stacked on every surface, and framed photos of her family on the walls. The warm lighting and cream-colored walls that usually felt cozy now seemed to close in as she took in the situation. A strange man, gunshot wound, in her apartment, at 3 a.m. "What the hell have I done?" she whispered. But there was no time for second-guessing. The man was losing blood, and if she didn't act fast, he'd lose consciousness, or worse. "Stay with me," she ordered, moving quickly to her bedroom. She kept a well-stocked first aid kit there, a habit from her nursing training, along with some supplies she'd borrowed from the hospital for emergencies. She'd never imagined an emergency like this. When she returned to the living room, the man's eyes were closed, his breathing shallow. His face was pale beneath a few days' worth of stubble, and she noticed for the first time how young he actually was. Early 30s maybe, handsome in a sharp, dangerous way. "Hey!" She snapped her fingers near his face. "Eyes open. What's your name?" His eyelids fluttered. "Marcus," he managed. "Okay, Marcus, I'm Ava. I'm going to help you, but you need to stay conscious. Talk to me. How long ago were you shot?" "Hour, maybe 2. His voice was strained. "Lost track. An hour or 2. That explained the blood loss." Ava set her supplies on the coffee table and moved to examine the wound. She needed to cut away his shirt to see it properly. "This is going to hurt," she warned, reaching for her scissors. "I know," he said, and there was something in his tone, a grim acceptance, that told her this wasn't his first time being injured. Ava cut away the jacket and shirt, revealing the wound beneath. It was bad. A through-and-through that had missed the major arteries but caused significant tissue damage. He'd been lucky. A few inches to the right and he'd have bled out before he made it to her door. "You need a hospital," she said flatly. "This needs proper surgery, antibiotics, monitoring." "No." His hand shot out, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. Those gray eyes locked onto hers, and for the first time Ava felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. "No hospitals, no police, no one can know I'm here. Marcus, you could die. I'll die if you call them." It wasn't a threat. It was a fact delivered with absolute certainty. Ava stared at him, her mind racing. Every protocol she'd ever learned told her to call 911, to get this man proper medical care, to cover herself legally. But something in his eyes, that desperate, dangerous sincerity, made her hesitate. "Who shot you?" she heard herself ask. A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. "People who want me dead." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give you." He released her wrist, his hand falling back to his side. "Please, just stop the bleeding. That's all I need." Ava knew she should refuse, should push him out her door and wash her hands of this entire situation, should protect herself from whatever trouble he was bringing to her doorstep, but she'd taken an oath, to do no harm, to help those in need, even when those in need showed up bleeding at her door at 3 a.m. "Fine," she said, grabbing sterile gauze, "but you're going to tell me if you start feeling faint, dizzy, or if the pain gets worse. Understood?" "Understood." For the next hour, Ava worked in focused silence. Her small living room transformed into a makeshift operating theater. She cleaned the wound with antiseptic, packed it with sterile gauze to control the bleeding, and used butterfly closures where she would have preferred stitches. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even close to hospital standard, but it would hold. Marcus bore it all with gritted teeth and barely a sound, though she could see the pain in the white-knuckled grip he had on her couch cushions. Most people would have been screaming. This man barely flinched. "You're good at this," he said, when she finally sat back, disposing of the bloody gauze in a plastic bag. "I better be. I spent 4 years learning how." Ava wiped her forehead with the back of her hand, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. "You're lucky. If the bullet had hit the subclavian artery, you'd be dead. Luck had nothing to do with it." He sat up slowly, testing his mobility. "I've been shot before. I know how to fall." The casual way he said it made Ava's stomach turn. "Who are you? Really?" Marcus looked at her for a long moment, those gray eyes assessing, calculating. She could see him weighing how much to tell her, how much truth she could handle. Finally, he reached into his pocket with his good hand and pulled out a phone. Expensive, she noticed, despite the cracked screen. He typed something one-handed and set it on the coffee table between them. "You should probably sit down," he said. "I am sitting." "Then hold on to something." Before Ava could ask what he meant, the phone buzzed. Once, twice, 3 times. Then it didn't stop. Message after message flooded the screen. She couldn't read them from where she sat, but she could see Marcus's expression as he watched them come in. Something shifted in his demeanor. The injured man on her couch disappeared, replaced by something harder, something that made the air in the room feel thinner. "They know where I am," he said quietly. "My people, I need to make a call." "Wait, your people? What is that?" But Marcus was already dialing, the phone pressed to his ear. When he spoke, his voice had changed entirely. Commanding, cold, absolute. "It's me, I'm secure, East Brooklyn, Hancock Street." A pause. "She's a civilian. A nurse. She helped me." Another pause, longer this time. His eyes flicked to Ava. "I don't care what protocol says. She's under protection. Full detail, now." He ended the call and set the phone down. Ava's heart was pounding. What did you just do? What does full detail mean? Marcus stood slowly, testing his balance. He was steady on his feet despite the blood loss, and now that he was upright, Ava realized just how tall he was, how he seemed to fill her small apartment with his presence. He walked to her window and looked out at the rain-slicked street below. Dawn was just beginning to break, painting the sky in shades of gray and pink. "It means," he said quietly, "that your life just changed. Ava Bennett. How do you know my name?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended. He gestured to the mail on her counter, the medical books with her name written on the inside covers. "I pay attention. Who are you?" Marcus turned from the window to face her. In the growing daylight, she could see him more clearly. The sharp jawline, the scar above his left eyebrow, the way he held himself like someone accustomed to command. And on his wrist, just visible beneath the torn cuff of his shirt, a tattoo, a black crown. Ava's blood went cold. She'd seen that symbol before, in news reports and whispered conversations among her co-workers who lived in Manhattan. Everyone in New York knew what the black crown meant, the black mafia. "No," she breathed. "No, no, no." Marcus's expression didn't change. "My name is Marcus Cole, and the men I just called, they'll be here within the hour to make sure nothing happens to you. I don't need protection. I need you out of my apartment." Ava stood, her hands shaking. "I helped you because you were dying, not because I wanted to get involved in whatever this is. I know." His voice was surprisingly gentle. "And I'm sorry, but the people who shot me saw me enter this neighborhood. They'll be looking for where I went. And when they find out you helped me..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Ava felt like the walls were closing in. Her safe, predictable life, the one she'd worked so hard to build, was crumbling around her. All because she'd opened her door to a stranger. "Why me?" she whispered. "Why did you come to my door?" Marcus looked at her for a long moment. "It was the only one with a light on. I thought maybe someone who kept their light on at 3 in the morning was someone who helped people." Despite everything, despite the fear coursing through her veins, Ava felt something twist in her chest. He'd been right. Before she could respond, her phone rang. Her actual phone, sitting on the kitchen counter. Unknown number. They both stared at it. "Don't answer that," Marcus said. The phone rang again, and again. Ava's hand trembled as she reached for it, but Marcus moved faster, crossing the room in 3 strides and placing his hand over hers. "Ava, don't." The phone went to voicemail. Seconds later, it rang again. Through her window, as daylight broke fully over Brooklyn, Ava saw them. Black SUVs turning onto her street. 1, 2, 3. More behind them. Marcus saw them too. "They're here. Who's here? Your people or the people who want you dead?" A slight smile crossed his face, the first real expression she'd seen from him. "Mine. The others won't risk coming now." Ava watched in growing horror as the SUVs parked along her street, blocking both ends. Men in dark suits emerged, taking positions with military precision. They wore earpieces and moved with purpose, their eyes scanning every window, every doorway. Her neighbors were starting to notice. Mrs. Chen from across the street peered out from behind her curtains. The bodega owner on the corner stood in his doorway, phone already raised to record. "This can't be happening," Ava whispered. But it was. Her quiet street was being transformed into something from a movie. Except this was real. This was her life, her home, her neighborhood that would never look at her the same way again. Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and moved toward her door. "Where are you going?" Ava demanded. "To tell them you're off limits, that you're protected." "I don't want to be protected. I want this to never have happened." He paused at the door, his hand on the knob, and looked back at her. In the morning light streaming through her windows, she could see him clearly now. The exhaustion beneath the authority, the pain he was hiding, the weight of whatever world he carried on his shoulders. "I know," he said quietly, "but it did happen. And I promise you, Ava, I'll make sure you survive it." Then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him, leaving Ava alone in her blood-stained living room as the sun rose over a street full of men in suits. She sank onto her couch, the same couch where she'd just saved a stranger's life, and put her head in her hands. 24 hours ago, her biggest concern was whether she'd have enough energy to meal prep for the week. Now, she didn't even recognize her own life. Through the window, she watched Marcus emerge onto her front steps. The men in suits immediately surrounded him, speaking rapidly, their body language protective. One of them handed him a jacket, which he shrugged on carefully, hiding the bandage she'd wrapped around his shoulder. He gave orders, they listened, and when he pointed up at her window, every single one of them looked. Ava jerked back from the glass, her heart hammering. This was insane, this was impossible, this was her life now. As the morning sun climbed higher over Brooklyn, Ava Bennett realized with terrifying clarity that the moment she'd opened her door to a bleeding stranger, she'd stepped across a threshold she could never uncross. The only question now was whether she'd survive what came next. Outside, the men in suits remained, watching, waiting, protecting her from a danger she didn't understand. And somewhere in the city, the people who'd tried to kill Marcus Cole were learning that their target had survived, that someone had saved him, that someone now had a name, an address, and a target painted on her back. The rain had stopped, but the storm was just beginning. Ava didn't sleep. How could she? Every time she closed her eyes, she saw blood on her hands. Marcus's blood, dark and warm, staining her fingers as she'd worked to keep him alive. And when she opened them, she saw the reality that was somehow worse. Men in dark suits stationed outside her building like sentries, their presence transforming her quiet Brooklyn street into something unrecognizable. By 7 in the morning, she'd counted 23 of them. By 8, the number had grown to 35. She stood at her window, still wearing her blood-stained scrubs from the night before, watching her neighborhood wake up to this new abnormality. Mrs. Chen hadn't left her house. The morning dog walkers crossed to the other side of the street. Even the usual traffic seemed to avoid Hancock Street, as if the presence of those black SUVs had fundamentally altered the geography of the area. Ava's phone had rung 17 times since dawn. Unknown numbers, all of them. She hadn't answered a single call. Her apartment looked like a crime scene. Bloody gauze still sat in the plastic bag on her coffee table. The couch cushion where Marcus had bled bore a dark stain that she knew would never come out. Her first aid kit lay open, its contents scattered, evidence of the choice she'd made in the middle of the night, a choice that had irrevocably changed everything. The knock at her door made her jump even though she'd been expecting it. "Miss Bennett." The voice was professional, distant. "Mr. Cole would like to speak with you." Ava's hands clenched into fists. Of course he would. Because apparently, saving someone's life meant they owned a piece of yours now. She opened the door to find a man in his 40s, impeccably dressed despite the early hour. He had the bearing of ex-military, rigid posture, alert eyes that cataloged everything in a single glance. Behind him, 2 more men stood in the hallway. "Who are you?" Ava asked, not moving from the doorway. "James Rivera. I'm Mr. Cole's head of security." He spoke with the kind of calm authority that suggested he was used to being obeyed. "He's waiting downstairs. He'd like to discuss your situation." "My situation?" Ava's voice rose. "I don't have a situation. I had a normal life until last night." Rivera's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Sympathy, maybe, or pity. "I understand, Miss Bennett. But that life ended the moment you opened your door. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be. I don't accept anything, she said flatly. Tell Mr. Cole if he wants to talk, he can come up here. This is still my home. She slammed the door before Rivera could respond, her heart pounding. Through the peephole, she watched him speak into his wrist mic, his lips moving silently. Then he nodded and stepped aside. 3 minutes later, Marcus Cole knocked on her door. Ava opened it to find him looking remarkably recovered for a man who'd nearly bled to death on her couch 6 hours ago. He'd changed clothes, now wearing dark slacks and a black Henley that stretched across his shoulders. The bulge of bandages was visible beneath the fabric. His face had regained some color, though she could see the tightness around his eyes that spoke of pain he was hiding. You should be resting, she said before she could stop herself. A slight smile crossed his face. So should you. He was right. Ava could feel the exhaustion pulling at her bones, the kind of deep tiredness that came from fear and adrenaline finally wearing off. But she refused to show weakness in front of this man who'd turned her life upside down. What do you want? She asked. To talk. May I come in? It wasn't really a question, and they both knew it. Ava stepped aside, and Marcus entered her apartment with the careful movements of someone managing pain. He glanced around, taking in the bloodstains, the scattered medical supplies, the evidence of what she'd done for him. You saved my life, he said quietly, turning to face her. I wanted to thank you properly. You can thank me by leaving and taking your army with you. I wish I could. Marcus moved to her window, looking down at the street below. But it's not that simple anymore. Why not? You're alive. You got what you needed. Just go. He turned from the window, and in the morning light streaming through the glass, Ava could see him clearly. Really see him. Not just as the injured stranger from the night before, but as whatever, he actually was. There was something in his face, in the way he carried himself, that spoke of violence and power held in careful check. Victor Russo, Marcus said. That's who shot me. Do you know that name? Ava shook her head. He runs the Russo family. Italian mafia, old school, very traditional. We've been at odds for years over territory in Manhattan. Marcus spoke matter-of-factly, as if discussing business contracts rather than criminal empires. Last night was supposed to be a neutral meeting to discuss a truce. Instead, it was an ambush. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to understand what you're involved in now. Marcus's gray eyes fixed on hers. Russo's men saw me enter this neighborhood. They would have followed, except my people intercepted them 2 blocks away. But they know I came to this street. It's only a matter of time before they figure out which building, which apartment. Ava's throat went dry. And when they do, they'll assume you're connected to me. A girlfriend maybe, or a doctor on my payroll. Either way, you become leverage. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Leverage, Ava repeated slowly. You mean a target? Yes. She sank onto her couch, the blood-stained couch where this nightmare had started, and put her head in her hands. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. She was a nurse from Pennsylvania who worked double shifts and ate leftover pasta for dinner. She wasn't someone who got caught in mafia wars. How long? She asked without looking up. How long do I need, protection? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Until Russo is convinced you mean nothing to me. Or until he's no longer a threat. And how long will that take? I don't know. Ava's head snapped up. You don't know? You've turned my entire life upside down and you don't even know when, if, it'll go back to normal? No, Marcus said simply. I don't. This is the world I live in, Ava. Nothing is certain, nothing is safe. You survive by being stronger, smarter, and more ruthless than everyone else who wants you dead. I didn't ask for this world. No, you didn't. He moved closer, and despite everything, Ava found she couldn't look away from those gray eyes. But you made a choice last night. You could have left me on your doorstep, called the police, saved yourself, but you didn't. You brought me inside. You stopped the bleeding, you saved me. Because you were dying. And now I'm returning the favor. Marcus crouched down so they were at eye level, his voice softer, but no less intense. Those men outside, they're here to make sure you live through this. Every single one of them would take a bullet for you if necessary, because I've ordered it. You're under my protection now. I don't want your protection. Then you'll die. He said it without emotion, just fact. Russo will find you. He'll hurt you to get to me. And whatever mercy you showed me last night will mean nothing to him. Ava wanted to scream. She wanted to throw him out, call the police, pretend none of this had happened. But the rational part of her brain, the part that had been trained to assess situations and make critical decisions, knew he was right. She'd stepped into something far bigger and more dangerous than she'd understood, and now she was trapped. "What do I do?" she whispered. "I have to work. I have a life, bills to pay, patients who need me. I can't just disappear." "You won't have to." Marcus stood, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at his shoulder. "You'll continue your normal routine. Go to work, come home, but you'll have escorts, protection, and certain precautions will need to be taken." "What kind of precautions?" "We'll sweep your apartment for bugs, install better locks, monitor your communications. You'll need to be careful about what you say and who you talk to. No social media posts about your location. No patterns that can be predicted and exploited." Each word felt like another chain wrapping around her life. Ava looked around her small apartment, her sanctuary, her safe space, and realized it would never feel the same again. "I helped you because I'm a nurse," she said quietly. "Because I took an oath. Because someone needed help and I was there, that's all. I'm not a part of your world, Marcus. You are now." He pulled out his phone, typed something, and set it on her coffee table. "That's my number. If anything happens, anything at all, you call me. Day or night, understood?" Ava stared at the phone like it was a venomous snake. Taking that number felt like accepting this new reality, like agreeing that her old life was gone. But what choice did she have? "Fine," she said. Marcus nodded and moved toward the door, but he paused with his hand on the knob, looking back at her. "For what it's worth, I am sorry. You didn't deserve this, but I promise you, I'll keep you safe." "Until when? Until this Russo person forgets about me? Until your war is over? When does it end?" The look Marcus gave her was answer enough. In his world, it never ended. There was always another threat, another enemy, another war. Survival wasn't a destination. It was a constant state of vigilance. "Get some rest," he said instead of answering. "Rivera will be stationed outside your door. If you need anything, just ask." Then he was gone. Ava sat in the silence of her apartment, surrounded by the evidence of last night's choices. The sun continued to rise outside her window, indifferent to the chaos unfolding below. Life went on in New York City, millions of people going about their days, completely unaware that one nurse's simple act of mercy had dragged her into a world she'd only seen in movies. She needed to clean up, needed to sleep, needed to process everything that had happened. Instead, she walked to her window and looked down at Hancock Street. The count had risen to 40 men now. 40 men in dark suits, all of them here because she'd opened her door to a stranger. Some stood at attention. Others leaned against cars, smoking cigarettes. A few talked into wrist mics, coordinating what? Her protection? Her imprisonment? Mrs. Chen's curtains twitched across the street. The bodega owner was taking photos on his phone. This would be all over the neighborhood by noon. By tomorrow, it would probably be on the news. Mysterious gathering in Brooklyn. Mafia presence in residential neighborhood. Local nurse caught in organized crime investigation. Her career, her reputation, everything she'd worked for. All gone in one night. Ava's phone buzzed. She picked it up to find a text from an unknown number. "We've swept your apartment. You're clear. Please save this number. Rivera." Another buzz. "Hospital called. You're scheduled for a shift at 3 p.m. We'll have a car ready at 2:30 p.m. Rivera. They were monitoring her calls, managing her schedule, controlling her life. This was her reality now. Ava set the phone down and walked to her bathroom. She needed to shower, to wash Marcus's blood from her skin. But when she caught sight of herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Her dark hair was tangled. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. But it was the expression on her face that struck her most. A mixture of fear, anger, and something else she couldn't quite name. Resignation, maybe, or acceptance. She'd crossed a line last night, stepped through a door that had closed behind her, and there was no going back. By 2:30 p.m., Ava was dressed in clean scrubs, her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She'd managed 3 hours of fitful sleep and forced down a protein bar that tasted like cardboard. Her hands were steady as she packed her work bag, but her mind was racing. How was she supposed to act normal? How could she walk into Mount Sinai and pretend everything was fine when her entire life had imploded? The knock at her door was precise, professional. Rivera stood in the hallway, flanked by two other men she didn't recognize. "Ready, Miss Bennett? Do I have a choice?" A hint of sympathy crossed his weathered face. There's always a choice. But some choices have consequences we can't avoid. Ava followed them downstairs, where a black SUV waited at the curb. The windows were tinted so dark she couldn't see inside. One of Rivera's men opened the back door, and she climbed in, her heart pounding. The interior was immaculate. Leather seats, climate control, a screen embedded in the back of the front seat that currently displayed a map of their route to the hospital. Rivera got in beside her while the other two men took the front seats. "This is excessive," Ava said as they pulled away from the curb. "I'm going to work, not a war zone." "Every location is a potential war zone," Rivera replied. "That's why we prepare." They drove in silence through Brooklyn, crossing into Manhattan. Ava watched the city pass by her window, the same city she'd lived in for 3 years, now feeling foreign and dangerous. Every pedestrian was a potential threat. Every car that followed too closely was a possible tail. She hated that she was thinking this way, hated that Marcus Cole's paranoia was becoming her own. "How long have you worked for him?" she asked suddenly. Rivera glanced at her. 12 years. "And in those 12 years, how many people have needed protection? You'd be the first civilian." That stopped her. "What do you mean?" "Usually the people we protect are part of the organization. They know the risks. They've chosen this life." Rivera's voice was measured. "You're different. You're an innocent who made a compassionate choice. Mr. Cole takes that seriously. He has a funny way of showing it." Ava muttered. "He's keeping you alive. In our world, that's the greatest gift he can give." The SUV pulled up to Mount Sinai's staff entrance. Through the window, Ava could see her colleagues coming and going, completely normal, completely unaware. She wanted to be them again, to worry about patient ratios and medication schedules instead of mafia wars and death threats. "We'll be here when your shift ends," Rivera said. "Text me 15 minutes before. Same number I sent you earlier." Ava nodded and reached for the door handle. "Miss Bennett." Rivera's voice stopped her. "I know this isn't what you wanted, but for what it's worth, you did the right thing last night. Not many people would have opened that door. Maybe that's why they're smarter than me," she said, and got out of the car. The hospital enveloped her in familiar chaos. Ringing phones, beeping monitors, the antiseptic smell she'd grown to associate with purpose. Ava threw herself into work, grateful for the distraction. Vitals to check, IVs to start, patients who needed her attention. For 6 hours, she could almost pretend everything was normal, until her supervisor pulled her aside. "Ava, we need to talk." Doctor Sarah Chen was in her 50s, a tough but fair charge nurse who'd mentored Ava since her first day. Now she looked uncomfortable, her usual confidence replaced by something that looked like concern. "Is this about my schedule?" Ava asked. "Because I can cover. It's about the police report filed this morning. About your address." Ava's blood went cold. "What police report?" "Your neighbors called 911 about suspicious activity on your street. Multiple vehicles. Armed men. When police responded, they were told to leave." Sarah's eyes searched Ava's face. "What's going on? Are you in trouble?" Ava's mind raced. What could she say? What should she say? It's complicated. Complicated how? "Ava, if you're in danger, the hospital can help. We have resources for staff who—" "I'm not in danger," Ava interrupted, though the words tasted like lies. "I just helped someone last night. Someone who turned out to be more complicated than I thought. But I'm fine. Everything's fine." Sarah didn't look convinced. "If that changes, you tell me. Immediately. Understood?" "Understood." But as Ava returned to her rounds, she felt the weight of stares from her co-workers. Word was spreading. The weird situation at her apartment. The mysterious men. The police involvement. Her phone buzzed. Time to go. Car is waiting. Rivera. Ava gathered her things, said goodbye to the few colleagues who would still look at her, and headed for the exit. The SUV was there, right where they'd dropped her off. Same black vehicle, same tinted windows. Rivera held the door open. "How was work?" he asked as she climbed in. "Terrible," she said honestly. "Everyone knows something's wrong. They're asking questions I can't answer. You'll need to develop a cover story, something simple. Believable." A cover story. Ava laughed bitterly. My life has become a cover story. They were halfway back to Brooklyn when Rivera's phone rang. He answered, listened, and his expression hardened. Understood, we're 15 minutes out. He ended the call and leaned forward to the driver. Take the bridge route, now. The driver nodded and changed lanes abruptly, cutting across traffic. What's happening? Ava demanded. Rivera's hand went to something under his jacket. A gun, she realized with a jolt. Possible tail. Could be nothing. Could be Russo's people testing our response time. Oh my God. Stay calm. We've done this 1,000 times. But Ava could see the tension in his shoulders, the way the other two men in the front seat had gone on high alert. This was real. The danger Marcus had warned her about wasn't theoretical anymore. They took a series of turns that made no sense to her, doubling back, changing directions. Through the back window, she could see other black SUVs matching their movements. More of Marcus's men, creating a protective convoy around her. 20 minutes later, they pulled up to her building. Before she could move, Rivera's phone buzzed again. Clear. It was just traffic. He relaxed fractionally. False alarm. That was a false alarm? Ava's voice was shaking. I thought we were about to be attacked. Better to assume the worst and be wrong than assume the best and be dead, Rivera said calmly, as if this was completely normal. Ava practically fell out of the car, her legs unsteady. The street was full of Marcus's men again. She'd stopped counting how many. They watched her walk to her building, their presence both reassuring and terrifying. She'd made it 3 steps when she saw him. Marcus stood on her front steps, looking much better than he had that morning. The color had fully returned to his face, and though he moved carefully, the near-death pallor was gone. We need to talk, he said as she approached. Again? What now? Not here. He gestured to a black sedan at the curb, different from the SUV, sleeker. Please. Every instinct told Ava to refuse, to go inside her apartment, lock the door, and pretend this wasn't happening. But she was learning that in Marcus Cole's world, refusal wasn't really an option. She got in the car. Marcus slid in beside her, and the driver, someone new, someone Ava didn't recognize, pulled away from the curb smoothly. Where are we going? Ava asked. Somewhere we can talk privately. They drove through Brooklyn as evening descended on the city, the lights beginning to glow against the darkening sky. Ava watched the neighborhoods change, from her working-class area to increasingly upscale blocks, until they crossed into Manhattan proper. The buildings grew taller, the streets busier, and Ava realized with growing apprehension that they were heading toward the Upper East Side. The car pulled up to a high-rise that gleamed with glass and steel. A doorman rushed to open Marcus's door. Good evening, Mr. Cole. Evening, Thomas. Marcus offered his hand to help Ava out of the car. She hesitated, then took it, his grip warm and solid despite the bandage hidden beneath his sleeve. The building's lobby was all marble and modern art. A security desk manned by 2 men who nodded respectfully as Marcus passed. An elevator that required a key card to access. Marcus swiped his card and pressed the button for the penthouse. Of course it was the penthouse. Is this where you live? Ava asked as the elevator climbed smoothly upward. Yes. Why am I here? Marcus looked at her, his gray eyes unreadable. Because you deserve to understand what you've become a part of. The real conversation can't happen on your street where anyone might be listening. And you deserve the truth. The elevator opened directly into his apartment, because of course it did, and Ava stepped into a space that looked like it belonged in an architecture magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Manhattan, modern furniture in blacks and grays, art on the walls that was probably worth more than she'd make in a lifetime. This was Marcus Cole's world, power and wealth and danger wrapped in expensive minimalism. Drink? He offered, moving to a bar cart. No, just talk. Tell me what I need to know. Marcus poured himself 2 fingers of amber liquid, whiskey probably, and gestured for her to sit. Ava chose a chair by the window, deliberately not the couch that would have placed them closer together. He noticed but didn't comment. Victor Russo declared war this morning, Marcus said without preamble, formally, through channels that make it official in our world. What does that mean? It means things are going to get worse before they get better. It means the men around your building aren't just for show anymore. They're a necessary defense. And it means... He paused, swirling the whiskey in his glass. It means you're at the center of something you didn't ask for but can't escape. Ava felt her chest tighten. How long? Weeks, maybe months. Russo is old school, stubborn. This won't end quickly. And I'm supposed to just… what? Live my life with an army following me around? Pretend everything's normal while people are trying to kill you and maybe me? Yes. Marcus set his glass down and leaned forward. But I need you to understand something, Ava. I didn't choose this life either. I was born into it. My father built this organization. When he died, it became mine. I've spent 15 years maintaining what he created, protecting our people, navigating a world where one wrong move means death. That doesn't… I'm not asking for sympathy, he interrupted. I'm explaining context. You saved my life last night. Not because you knew who I was or what I could offer you, but because it's who you are. That kind of humanity is rare, especially in my world. So this is what? Gratitude? This is debt. Marcus's voice was firm. In my world, debts are sacred. You gave me my life. I owe you yours. That's not negotiable. That's not something I can walk away from, even if you want me to. Ava stared at him. This man who'd stumbled bleeding onto her doorstep and irrevocably changed everything. She wanted to hate him, wanted to blame him for ruining her peaceful existence. But looking at him now, really looking, she saw something she hadn't expected. Burden. Marcus Cole carried his power like a weight, not a privilege. Every decision he made rippled outward, affecting lives, determining fates. And now she was one of those lives, whether she wanted to be or not. I just wanted to help someone, she said quietly. I know. His voice softened. And you did, more than you realize. Through the windows behind him, Manhattan glittered with a million lights. Somewhere in that vast city, Victor Russo was planning his next move. Somewhere danger was circling closer, and Ava Bennett, a nurse from Pennsylvania who'd only wanted to save lives, was trapped in the center of it all. What happens now? She asked. Marcus stood and moved to the window, his silhouette dark against the bright city beyond. Now we survive, together, until this war ends or Russo does. And if I refuse? If I just leave? Go back to Pennsylvania? He turned to look at her, and the sadness in his eyes was answer enough. Then Russo's men will follow you there, and your family becomes involved too. Ava's breath caught. She hadn't even thought about her parents, her sister in Pittsburgh. The ripple effects of her choice extending outward, touching everyone she loved. This is a nightmare, she whispered. Yes, Marcus agreed, but it's one you'll survive. I promise you that. As Rivera drove Ava back to Brooklyn an hour later, the city lights blurring past her window, she realized that Marcus Cole had been right about one thing. Her life had changed the moment she opened her door, and there was no going back, only forward, into whatever darkness waited ahead. The question wasn't whether she could survive it. The question was who she'd become by the time it was over. 3 days felt like 3 years. Ava's life had become a strange paradox, simultaneously confined and exposed. She went to work at Mount Sinai, returned home, slept fitfully, and repeated the cycle. But nothing was the same. The black SUVs followed her everywhere. Rivera's team rotated shifts outside her apartment, and the stares from colleagues and neighbors had evolved from curious to openly fearful. On the 4th morning, her supervisor called her into the office. Dr. Sarah Chen sat behind her desk, her expression carefully neutral, but Ava could read the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers drummed against the desk, a nervous tell she'd never seen before. Close the door, please. Ava's stomach dropped. She closed the door and sat down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The hospital administration has concerns, Sarah began, about your situation. My situation. Ava, we've had reports. Security footage shows armed men escorting you to and from the building. Other staff members are uncomfortable. Some patients have asked to be reassigned from your care. Sarah's voice softened. I fought for you in that meeting. I told them you're one of our best nurses, but they're worried about liability, about safety. I'm not dangerous, Ava said, her voice tight. I helped someone who was hurt. That's all I did. I know, but the people you're associated with now… Sarah trailed off. Look, I need you to be honest with me. Are you involved with organized crime? The question hung in the air like a guillotine blade. No, Ava said firmly. I'm not involved. I'm just caught in something I didn't ask for. Sarah studied her for a long moment, Can you make it stop? Could she? Ava thought of Marcus's words in his penthouse. This won't end quickly. She thought of Victor Russo's war declaration, of the men who wanted her dead simply because she'd shown mercy. I don't know, she admitted. Then I need to put you on administrative leave. Paid, Sarah added quickly. Until this resolves. I'm sorry, Ava, but I have to think about the safety of our entire staff. The words were professional, sympathetic, and completely devastating. Ava walked out of Mount Sinai 20 minutes later with her badge deactivated and her locker emptied. Rivera was waiting by the SUV, his expression unreadable as he opened the door. Bad news? He asked as they pulled away from the hospital. I've been suspended. They're afraid I'll bring violence to the hospital. Ava laughed bitterly. My career is over. It's not over, just paused. You don't understand, in nursing, reputation is everything. Once word spreads that I've been associated with the mafia, no hospital will hire me. I'm done. Rivera was quiet for a moment. Then, Mr. Cole would like to see you. Of course he would. Ava closed her eyes. Fine, take me to him. Marcus's penthouse looked different in daylight, less imposing somehow. The floor-to-ceiling windows revealed Central Park stretching out below, a patch of green in the concrete jungle. Marcus stood at those windows, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in rapid Italian. He ended the call when Ava entered, turning to face her. He ditched the sling she'd insisted he wear, though she could tell his shoulder still bothered him from the careful way he moved. You heard, Ava said flatly. Rivera informed me. I'm sorry. Are you? Because this is exactly what you said would happen. My life falling apart. Everything I worked for, gone. She moved to the windows, staring out at the city that suddenly felt hostile. I spent 4 years in nursing school, took on $60,000 in debt, worked double shifts to build my reputation, and now it's over because I made the mistake of helping you. It's not over. Don't. Ava spun to face him. Don't tell me it's just temporary. Don't tell me it'll be fine. You don't get to do that. You don't get to destroy my life and then offer empty reassurances. Marcus's jaw tightened. You're right. I don't. But I can offer you something else. What? Money? I don't want your blood money. Not money, purpose. He moved closer, his gray eyes intense. You're a healer, Ava. That's who you are at your core. And my world, my people, they need that. We have doctors on payroll, but they're there for the money. You're different. You actually care. What are you suggesting? Work for me, officially. My organization has over 300 people. They get hurt. They need medical care. But they can't go to hospitals without questions being asked. Marcus's voice was measured. I'm offering you a position. Private physician for my people. Better pay than Mount Sinai, complete discretion. And you'd still be doing what you were born to do. Helping people. Ava stared at him in disbelief. You want me to become a mob doctor? I want you to continue being a healer. The circumstances are just different. Different. Ava's voice rose. Different is an understatement, Marcus. You're asking me to cross a line I swore I never would, to become part of your criminal organization. You're already part of it, he said quietly. Like it or not. The only question is whether you do it on your terms or spend your suspension hiding in your apartment, watching your career die. The truth of his words hit like a physical blow. He was right. She was already tainted by association, already marked. The life she'd known was gone whether she accepted his offer or not. I need to think, she said. Take your time. Marcus handed her a card, heavy stock, embossed lettering. Just a phone number. When you're ready to decide, call me. That evening, Ava sat in her apartment surrounded by medical textbooks and memories of who she used to be. Her phone rang. Her mother calling from Pennsylvania for the 3rd time that day. She couldn't avoid it anymore. Hi, Mom. Ava, finally. Honey, are you okay? Mrs. Chen's daughter posted something on Facebook about police cars on your street and men with guns. Mom, I'm fine. It's just a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding that requires armed men. Her mother's voice pitched higher. What's going on? Should we come there? Should you come home? Home. The word felt foreign now. Could she go home? Would Russo's men follow her there, putting her family in danger? I'm handling it, Mom, I promise. It's just complicated. That's what you said last time. Ava Marie Bennett, you tell me the truth right now. So Ava did. Not all of it. Not the mafia connections or the war or the death threats, but enough. She'd helped someone who turned out to be dangerous. Now she was caught in the aftermath. Her mother was silent for a long moment. This person you helped, are they worth all this trouble? Ava thought of Marcus, of his intensity, his unexpected vulnerability, the way he carried his world like a burden, of the debt he felt he owed her. I don't know, she admitted, but I'm trying to figure that out. After they hung up, Ava found herself holding Marcus's card. The embossed numbers seemed to mock her, a phone call away from accepting a reality she'd never imagined for herself. Her own phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Russo made a move tonight. Attacked one of our warehouses in Queens. 3 men injured. They needed a hospital but couldn't risk it. They're suffering because we don't have someone like you. Marcus. Ava closed her eyes. He was manipulating her, using her compassion as leverage. But he was also right. Another text. I'm not asking you to become something you're not. I'm asking you to be exactly who you are, in a place where it matters most. Ava stood and walked to her window. The men were still there, still protecting her, still evidence of her new reality. She thought of the Hippocratic oath she'd taken. First, do no harm. But what about do good? What about helping those who had no other options? Marcus's people were criminals. But they were also human beings who bled and suffered and needed care. Could she live with herself if she refused? Could she live with herself if she accepted? The next morning, Ava called the number on the card. Marcus answered on the first ring. Have you decided? I want to see them, the men who were injured. Before I agree to anything, I want to see what I'd actually be doing. Fair enough. I'll send Rivera. An hour later, Ava was in the back of the SUV, heading to an address in Queens she'd never heard of. They pulled up to what looked like an ordinary warehouse, until she saw the guards, the security cameras, the subtle signs of heavy protection. Inside, the warehouse had been converted into something between a clinic and a bunker. 3 men lay on cots in varying states of injury. Gunshot wounds, knife lacerations, burns, and no one to properly treat them except a nervous young man who introduced himself as Tommy, a medical student who'd dropped out in his 2nd year. I'm doing my best, Tommy said, his hands shaking, but I'm not qualified for this. Ava looked at the men, at their pain, their suffering. She thought of her oath, her purpose, and she made her choice. Get me supplies, she said, rolling up her sleeves. And someone explain what happened to each of them. I need medical histories. For the next 4 hours, Ava worked. She cleaned wounds, sutured lacerations, stabilized the most critical patient. She fell into the rhythm she knew: assess, prioritize, treat. It didn't matter that these men worked for Marcus Cole. It didn't matter that they'd been injured doing something probably illegal. They were human beings in pain, and she could help them. When she finally stepped back, exhausted but satisfied, Marcus was there. She hadn't seen him enter, but he stood in the doorway, watching her work with an expression she couldn't quite read. You're incredible, he said quietly. I'm a nurse. This is what I do. Ava pulled off her gloves. But I have conditions. If I do this, if I work for you, I do it my way. No questions about who I treat or how. Medical decisions are mine alone. And if you ever ask me to do something that compromises my ethics, I walk. Understood? Understood. And I need proper equipment. A real clinic, not a warehouse with cots. If I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do it right. A slow smile crossed Marcus's face. I'll have it built within a week. Ava looked around at the makeshift clinic, at the men she'd just treated, at the strange new world she'd chosen to step into fully. Her old life was gone. Mount Sinai, her quiet apartment, her anonymity, all of it sacrificed the moment she'd opened her door to a bleeding stranger. But maybe, just maybe, she could build something meaningful from the ruins. One more thing, she said. I'm not your property. I'm not your possession. I'm a professional providing a service. That's all. Marcus met her eyes. That's all I've ever wanted from you, Ava. Your skill, your compassion, everything else. He paused. Everything else is up to you. As Rivera drove her back to Brooklyn, Ava realized she'd crossed a threshold she could never uncross. She'd become part of Marcus Cole's world, not as a victim or a pawn, but as a willing participant. The question was whether she'd made the right choice, or whether she'd just sealed her own fate. Outside her window, the city glittered with possibilities and dangers, and Ava Bennett, nurse, healer, and now something she'd never imagined, faced her uncertain future with equal parts fear and determination. There was no turning back now, only forward, into whatever came next. 2 weeks later, Ava stood in what Marcus had built for her, a state-of-the-art medical clinic hidden in a nondescript building in Red Hook. Examination rooms, surgical suite, pharmacy stocked with everything she could need. It was better equipped than some hospitals she'd worked in. Her new reality had settled into an unexpected rhythm. She treated Marcus's people, gunshot wounds, broken bones, infections that couldn't be explained to emergency room doctors. She saved lives that would have been lost to pride and secrecy, and slowly, grudgingly, she found purpose in it. But Victor Russo hadn't forgotten about her. The attack came on a Tuesday night. Ava was closing the clinic when the lights went out. Rivera's hand was on her arm instantly, pulling her toward the back exit, but they were too slow. Men poured in through the front, 6 of them, armed, moving with military precision. "Dr. Bennett," one of them said, his accent thick with old-world Italian. "Mr. Russo would like a word." Rivera's gun was out, but they were outnumbered. Ava's heart hammered as she calculated odds, exits, possibilities. None of them good. Then Marcus's voice cut through the darkness. "She's not going anywhere." He emerged from the shadows with 20 men, surrounding Russo's soldiers in seconds. The tension was explosive. One wrong move and the clinic would become a war zone. "This is neutral ground, Cole," the Italian said. "Medical facilities are off limits. You know the rules. You broke the rules when you came for her." Marcus's voice was ice. "Ava Bennett is under my protection. Officially. Permanently. Any move against her is a move against me." The standoff lasted an eternity. Finally, Russo's men retreated, but not before their leader delivered a message. "This isn't over. Russo wants acknowledgement, compensation, or the girl dies." When they were gone, Ava's legs gave out. Marcus caught her, his arms steady and solid. "You're okay," he murmured. "I've got you." For the first time since this nightmare began, Ava let herself lean into someone else's strength, let herself be vulnerable. And in that moment, something shifted between them, something that went beyond debt and obligation. The meeting with Victor Russo happened 3 days later, in a neutral location. An upscale restaurant closed to the public, filled with tension and armed men on both sides. Ava insisted on being there. If she was the reason for this war, she deserved to see how it ended. Russo was older than she expected, mid-60s with silver hair and cold eyes that assessed her like property. He spoke to Marcus as if she weren't there. "You risked everything for a nurse? That's weakness, Cole." "That's honor," Marcus replied. "Something you wouldn't recognize." The negotiation was brutal. Marcus offered territory, money, business concessions, bleeding his empire to protect one life. Ava watched in growing horror as he dismantled pieces of his power, all because she'd opened her door one rainy night. Finally, Russo leaned back. "You give up this much for her. She must be special." "She is. Then we have terms." Russo's smile was predatory. "The girl lives. Your protection stands. But you owe me, Cole, and one day I'll collect." It wasn't peace, it was a temporary truce built on future debt. But it was enough. Weeks passed. The men outside Ava's building decreased from 200 to 20 to a handful. Life didn't return to normal. It couldn't. But it found a new equilibrium. Ava ran her clinic, saved lives, made a difference in a world she'd once judged from the outside. And Marcus had become something she hadn't expected. Not just her protector, but her partner. Someone who understood the impossible position she was in because he lived in it every day. One evening, as they stood on his penthouse balcony overlooking the city, he asked the question she'd been dreading. "Do you regret it, opening your door that night?" Ava thought about everything she'd lost. Her career, her anonymity, her simple, predictable life. Then she thought about what she'd gained. Purpose, strength, the knowledge that she could survive anything. "No," she said finally, "but I'm not the same person who opened that door. None of us are the same after we survive something." Marcus turned to face her, his gray eyes reflecting the city lights. "But we're still here, still fighting, still choosing to live rather than just exist." Ava looked out at Manhattan, at the millions of lights representing millions of lives. each one complex and messy and real. Somewhere in that vast city, Victor Russo was planning his next move. Somewhere new threats were emerging. But for now, in this moment, Ava Bennett had found her place in a world she'd never imagined. Not as a victim, not as a pawn, as a healer who'd chosen to bring light into darkness, even when that darkness threatened to consume her. "What happens now?" she asked. Marcus smiled, a real smile, rare and genuine. "Now we live. We protect what matters. We survive together. No turning back, no turning back." As the sun set over New York City, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold, Ava made peace with her choices. She'd crossed lines she never thought she would, entered a world she'd been raised to fear, become someone she barely recognized. But she'd also discovered strength she didn't know she possessed, found purpose in impossible circumstances, and learned that survival wasn't about avoiding darkness. It was about carrying light into it. The mafia nurse and the crime boss, standing together against whatever came next. It wasn't the life she'd planned, but it was the life she'd chosen, and that made all the difference.